Hello, and welcome to the Regional Association of West Quebecers RAWQ Talk series. In this series, we will welcome speakers from across the region to join us and present on various topics. The RAWQ Talk series is made possible under the Secretariat for Relations with English-Speaking Quebecers through the Community Health and Social Services Network and its Enhancing Regional Community Capacity Initiative. Today, we will hear from Alex Pedham, the project manager at Youth for Youth Quebec, on their flag initiative and more about the organization.
Well, thanks so much for the introduction, Haley, and hi everyone who's watching at the moment. Like it's been said, my name's Alex Pedham. I'm the project manager at Y4Y Quebec, and Y4Y, Youth for Youth, we've been incorporated just over 2 years now. And we strive to represent the English youth community of Quebec, both on island, off island, across the entire province. And it's been a pleasure working with them. I'm in my second year with the organization, and I've enjoyed everything I've done with them. So let me talk a bit about what it is I've done with them. This is the flag project, generously funded by Canadian Heritage at the federal level. And this project started late last year under the direction of Kelly Weber, not myself. So I'd be sort of remiss not to mention all the work that she'd put in before I swooped in around March or so, sort of at an auspicious time this year to take over a relatively public-facing project like one like this. So unfortunately, we haven't changed the direction of the project so much. We've had to maybe scale down some of its operations and moved what would have been much more public. We would have been traveling the province. We would have been sharing the flag designs with different communities. Whereas now that's, again, understandably had to have been put largely on the virtual platforms. So the flag project. We had, this started late last year, late 2019, and the idea was that we'd noticed that there's a flag for all the French-speaking minorities in every other Canadian province and territory. And we then noticed, well, there's none for the English-speaking minority community in Quebec. And we thought that, we should change that. It would be interesting to have us join this community of communities. And the grant we'd received, just in the context it was given, was to promote the vitality of a minority linguistic community. And we thought this was a perfect way to sort of blend both missions into one. So you might recognize the flag behind my avatar at the moment. It's the Franco-Ontarian flag. I might have mispronounced that, for the French minority community in Ontario. And so we didn't want to just tell the English communities of Quebec what it was exactly that we thought represented them. We thought it'd be best if they told us what they thought represented themselves to us. So we hired 2 youth artists at the beginning of this year to draft up 75 different symbols of whatever it was that kind of came to mind to them at the moment. They brainstormed for a fairly long time to put this together. And what you're seeing here are the top 10 symbols that came back to us from a couple hundred of survey responses from young English citizens in Quebec. And so you can see, for example, some are a bit more tongue-in-cheek than others, but I think they all speak to something honest, to something truly, I think, representative, subjectively speaking. So say you have hockey, you have deer, you have beaver, forest, poutine, of course. And that's what we had to start working with. So this was the time where I kind of transitioned in from Kelly's work, and I hired 4 new sets of artists to then come up with the drafts of the flags themselves. And they were never told that they had to sort of copy paste these 10 symbols in some sort of fashion, but these were used really as the foundations of how they should approach these flags to have some sort of democratic, say, legitimacy, in that it would speak to something that was felt across the population. So we then had to transition all of these sessions on Zoom. It was a 2-month process, roughly, transitioning these 10 symbols to rather 3 final flags. And this is just a picture of some of the earlier versions, some of their rough drafts that the 4 artists had come up with. And at this point in the game, we really wanted to solicit quite a bit of input from the community again, because we thought that this should be something that's more ongoing, because it could be in such a way that, you know, those couple hundred who had responded with their favorite symbols, their most representative symbols, could see no likeness in the final product. So we put together a symbolism committee. In fact, it was active somewhat before the time the 4th youth artists came in, but they were there to constantly give their input, to say what it is they thought, either aesthetically, either politically, were good or bad directions that the artists were taking the project in. We hired a vexillologist, a flag specialist, David Roger, who, again, his input was very, very appreciated during the project. I love flags, but I know nothing about them. So whatever he had to say was often taken as the gold standard to proceed with. And then throughout the work, again, we would often send both the drafts of the flags that you see in front of you and earlier and later versions of them to different English-speaking communities, groups, and French-speaking groups, because we thought, look, the whole point is not to divide Quebec, to divide these communities. It's really to have, you know, have ourselves represented, but in such a way that was non-confrontational. We don't want to, you know, bring up any old bad feelings between these communities. This is really meant to be going forward together. So I think we got a lot of valid input. One that stuck with me, I'll be honest, I forget which French-speaking group it was, but I thought it was very insightful, and this is something I should maybe look up and thank them a second time for, was the idea that don't make it look as if this flag represents a sort of English Canadian peninsula living within the French Quebec province, to make it in such a way that the Anglophones are sort of an island of Canada within this big blue province of Quebec. And I thought that was a very good point, because that's quite obviously the opposite intentions of what our message is trying to strive for. So I think I really took that to heart and shared it with the artists, who completely understood where it was they and I were coming from. And then I think back in early May, we then launched the actual voting process. And this was one of the earlier icons we'd used to promote it. We had a few contests that were meant to elicit interest, but I think the interest sort of, you know, it launched of its own accord. We didn't need to push it all that much. We were lucky enough to have a few media outlets come to who were they themselves very interested in the project. So this allowed for more representation in the media, more interest garnered from maybe corners of the province that we might not otherwise have had. So in all honesty, it blew up far more than we'd anticipated, but we're by no means complaining, because I think the whole point of this process, of this project, was to have as much input from the community as possible. And I think having the thousands and thousands of response we're still getting to our survey speaks to, I think, the interest, and speaks to how widespread it's become. And we made sure early on in drafting the survey questions themselves were that you can have either say flag A, flag B, flag C, or D, none of the above, if none of them speak to you. And we then had added a second page quite quickly and quite early on in the process, saying what it was exactly that you especially liked, or what it was that you especially didn't like. So then we can say going forward, have a better idea, and again, a more democratic approach to how we would make some sort of flag for a community. Maybe I should talk a bit about the flags themselves. Okay, well, the first flag on the left here, you see the recognizable fleur de lis, the flag, the flower of the Quebec province. But we decided to have the tip in an undulated fashion to represent a bit of the Canadian flag, to show a bit of what Quebec finds itself in. And then all the colors in the background are meant to represent that this is not simply one community, but a community of communities, because there's Scottish, Indigenous, you know, we can go back through many generations as to what it is that makes up the English-speaking community. It's not homogenous by any means whatsoever. That was one of our flags. The second flag here, we have again a reference to the flowers of many of the home countries or home regions of those that make up the English-speaking community. And the white pine tree is a symbol often seen in Indigenous communities in the south of Quebec. So we thought that was also very important to acknowledge that they too have a substantial English-speaking component in their communities as well. And then the third finally speaks a bit more to the environmental, or not the environmental, but rather the surroundings of Quebec. We have mountain ranges, very old mountain ranges. We have beautiful skylines, and the art at the middle of it represents, it's a crest of antlers, which that too speaks to an Indigenous symbol that's often seen in south of the province. So we thought that this collection of 3 flags, we believe, has quite a bit to offer. It's been, say, vetted by vexillologists, and we think that this can be a very important and very representative swath of things represented by the 3. So at the time of this recording, we still have about 24 hours or so before the survey process ends. So unfortunately, it may or may not be too late come time this is distributed. But either way, we're very happy that you listened to us today, heard our pitch, and that we'll be circulating quite a few documents, quite a few publications to show exactly what it was I've just talked about now, and to show where this project might go going forward. It officially ends at the end of the month, but it'd be very interesting, I think, with all the feedback that we've gotten, to try to do something further along the road with it. That obviously is yet to be seen, but I think there's an appetite for it. And today, the day of this recording is Tuesday, what day of the week is it? Tuesday, the 15th of September. And after tomorrow, on Thursday, in fact, is Y for Y's AGM, if I may plug the AGM for a moment. And that's where we're going to be officially unveiling the results of the flag. And we're going to have, I believe, Kelly, the original project coordinator, speak a bit to the efforts that were put into it and the sort of the groundwork that she'd placed before I swooped in and potentially took much of the credit, which I would hate to give the impression that I'm doing. And I believe David Roger might also be able to speak a bit to the more the historical and aesthetic components of flags, something that I think would really enrich people's understandings as well. Because I too might have a few questions. And I think, for example, some important and interesting things that he'd done is, for example, if you still see the flags in front of you, we've decided to sneak an E into the middle flag, that which holds all of the flowers of home countries, home regions, just things of that nature that I think come as something fairly obvious to someone who's really gotten familiar with flag designs. And some input that he'd given us earlier on in the process is that crests used to be very prominent features in flags, but those have really gone out of fashion as of late, largely because often these are associated with colonial projects, and that, for obvious and good reasons, has sort of fallen by the wayside in terms of designs. So it's these sorts of things. And you also have to be aware that when most flags are seen, they're seen from the ground up. You have to sort of crank your neck back. So you don't want to have any symbols that are too complicated. You want to keep these staying rather minimalist, to have appeal that's both something that's immediately recognizable from a distance and something that's fully sort of grasped from a distance as well, say. And I think that really benefited the project, and I think it benefits whichever one of these 3 flags is the one that we're going to take going forward. And more so to conclude, this not meant to be a divisive project in the least. I can understand how that could be an interpretation of it, but I think I'd like to again push back on that quite a bit, because we're all about having the English-speaking community feel as if they belong in the province, in Quebec. They feel as if they're part of the broader mosaic. And as with the other linguistic minorities in other provinces, we thought that a project like this could go a long way in achieving what other provinces may have done, and going a long way in achieving that true sense of belonging for the English community here in Quebec. So well, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hand the microphone back to Haley. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Alex, for sharing more about Youth for Youth Quebec and its initiatives. And thank you to each of you for tuning in this week. Be sure to keep an eye on our YouTube channel as we will have new RAWQ Talk episodes bi-weekly for you to enjoy. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay in the loop. For more information about the Regional Association of West Quebecers, or to become a member, visit our website, www.westquebecers.ca. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter @West Quebecers.